welcome to a show where you will hear about how our liberty is being eroded by the very people that swear an oath to protect it.
Today, the president signed a big new anti-terrorism bill that would expand the government's ability to track down terrorists, but at some cost.
On this show, we will discuss many of the lies that the government that hates us, by the way, we will discuss the lies that the people in positions of power and influence spread every day.
And what is the best way to confuse children? Confuse them about their sexuality, confuse them about their gender, expose them to things that their little brains are not ready for yet. That is how they are confusing children. It is leading to chaos, and Big Daddy government, of course, can be there to pick us all up and take care of us at the end of it.
We will also talk about how current elected leadership at all levels of government has been corrupted by power and control, as well as discuss the types of leadership needed to correct our republic's course.
We the people. It was time to remember that we the people are the government.
Providing assistance for the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians. That's the number one priority for the United States right now.
I am your host, Larry Linton, retired U.S. Navy Command Master Chief and prior Tennessee House of Representatives District 12 candidate, and welcome to the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast. Welcome to this week's show, ladies and gentlemen. Again, coming to you from the Goat Locker studio here in Sevierville, Tennessee. We'll be discussing leadership this week, and we have a fine example of servant leadership joining us on the program today. As I mentioned last week, Mrs. Tina Tobin from the Tennessee Liberty Network joins the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast to talk about some of the things her and the group of servant leaders she is part of are doing over there in Sumner County. Not only in Sumner County, for the entire state of Tennessee. Tina is a fierce advocate for freedom, and she has been instrumental in Tennessee Liberty Network exposing many of the government's, yes, the government that hates us, exposing many of the government's lies surrounding COVID and the vaccines. Tina also knows what it's like to take a stand in the arena and run for public office. Although unsuccessful in the GOP primary last year for a seat on the county commission, she has not let that hold her back from continuing the work necessary to secure the rights and freedoms of her fellow Tennesseans. Before we get into the interview, I just want to let everybody know I'm still working the details of an additional 2 interviews for this program. One with Mr. Bryson Gray, the wildly popular Christian conservative rapper, and the other interview with Mr. Ken Good, who serves on the board of directors for Professional Bondsmen of Texas. Before we break for the commercial and get right into the interview, I want to give a big shout out to all Tennesseans that were part of the effort that caused the Tennessee House Transportation Committee to delay for 2 weeks a hearing on the toll roads bill. You see, conservative advocacy for or against legislation does work. Keep up the work of calling or emailing the members of this committee while they are on their pause to, and this is in their own words, not mine, they are stating that they need time to breathe and will combat misinformation with the truth. Now, isn't that rich? They've been telling Tennesseans that choice lanes are not toll roads. Well, anytime you have to pay a fee to drive on a road, it's a toll road. Anyway, here's a word from the show's sponsor, Anchor.fm, and when we come back, we'll get right into the interview. Well, ladies and gentlemen, now that you heard the bio, I have the infamous or famous Tina Tobin on here, who's a member of the Tennessee Liberty Network. And as I told you about in her bio, she recently ran for the city commission, or county commission, although she was unsuccessful in the primary. There was a lot of success in taking over the county commission there in Sumner County with more electoral seats going to conservatives. So, Tina, welcome to the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast. I hope your day is going well.
Yes, thank you, Larry. It's an honor to be on your podcast. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you. Again, thank you for coming on. So, Today's topic, we're talking about leadership and the type of leadership that's really needed, not only at the federal level, but the state and down into the county level, in order to restore the citizen sovereignty that is the design of our constitutional republic. And as I mentioned earlier, we talked about the county commission there in Sumner County. Can you briefly go into what happened there and what positive things that you're seeing coming out and the servant leadership that is being displayed by the people there now?
Sure. Well, for the longest time in Sumner County, we have 24 commissioners, and we had 2 that were excellent, a few that were okay, but the majority were just longtime cronies. They never met an expenditure that they didn't love. So we would go to the meetings. We had a group of us, and it just kind of built and built. And we just got so tired of watching the same 2 people, make their case and wanting to be the voice of the people and reading things that we had sent them in emails, how we wanted them to vote, and then just watching the rest of the commissioners vote in the full opposite will of the people. And we decided that we were going to run. There's a group called the Sumner County Constitutional Republicans. And, the majority of us were part of that. But there were people that, weren't necessarily, that were conservatives, but were kind of involved in other groups. But we ran, I believe altogether, we ran like 18 people. And, we had some who lost, some who were tossed off the ballot, different things like that. But we got 14 of them in out of the 24. So it was a tremendous victory. And even those of us that didn't win, like myself, I came pretty close, within 19 votes. And I had the satisfaction of knowing that, at least the person I ran against didn't just run unopposed, which is kind of the typical path for, a lot of these local positions. People run unopposed. They don't have to knock a single door, and they just get in. So at least I knew that, I knocked thousands of doors, and my opponent had to work this time to get that spot. So that felt good. And our commission has been hard at work. They undid this massive boondoggle that our previous commission had voted for. They wanted to renovate essentially this old barn in our town that's just been a pet project of the cronies. It's not historical. It actually, they wouldn't have owned the land right around the barn where there was going to be a company who's a big developer that would be allowed to do blasting and have the mineral rights right around this barn, but they were going to spend millions to renovate it. And our commission, that was one of the first things they did, was undo that. And they're working hard to go through everything that the previous commission did that was fully against the will of the people and not wise stewardship of our dollars. And some they're undoing, some unfortunately, the bills are incurred and we have to figure out a way to pay for them. But it's wonderful that we have a voice with these commissioners.
Absolutely. As I always state, there is no system on this planet so well designed to waste the people's sweat equity than the government that is apathetically let to be elected. So battling somebody in the arena, standing in the arena so that the incumbents don't have to just sit back on their laurels and count on the apathy to get reelected. You actually forced your opponent to either be more conservative or actually have to work to get the seat. I encountered the same thing here in Sevier County. When I ran for the state general assembly, he was going to be unopposed. I mean, very rarely does a Democrat run in Sevier County. Because if they put a D after their name, they're guaranteed to not get elected. And I gained a good percentage of the vote as an independent. But I did the knocking on doors. But the apathy of the people, just especially with voting straight party line, that's going to get us in the end, and it keeps people in power that willingly take our sweat equity and they waste it on pet projects like that. I'm sure there is somebody somewhere that donates something in order to get the benefit for that barn being renovated. If it serves no fundamental process of securing the people's liberty, it definitely benefited a politician's pocket somehow.
Oh, it absolutely did. And I know, it's been a pet project for a long time. And every time it's revived as something different. And interestingly, they did at one point go to the public for a fundraiser, and they raised about $30,000. So we felt like, well, that's right there. There's your level of interest. The public has $30,000 worth of interest in it, not millions of dollars. So it was kind of crazy. But yeah, and we still don't know the full connection there. But we know that, like I said, it's coming. It was going to be an event center. It was going to be this. There's always something great that it's going to be that will cost the taxpayers millions.
Right. Yep. There is, the third party payer, which government ends up becoming.
Right.
A third party payer is never concerned with cost because somebody else is paying the bills, i.e. the taxpayers. And they're definitely not concerned with quality because it's not personally for them, it's for what they believe to be something in the public interest, or what they're selling as being in the public interest, when it's really just benefiting their pocketbook in some way, shape, or form, either through greater influence with a constituent or greater influence with a business sector. That's how politicians are here working. And in fact, I had a nice little discussion on Twitter. I had a Twitter battle the other day that was with Senator Frank Nicely, who's considered, he's mostly conservative, but he was sponsoring the Senate bill, the companion bill to Representative Dale Carr's bill that was going to ease the restrictions on foreign workers and the businesses that had to pay for their vetting.
Right, I saw that.
And he was like, "Oh, you're not in favor of foreign or immigration or legal immigration?" I'm like, that has nothing to do with the thing. Who benefits from that piece of legislation? Businesses and foreign workers. Who doesn't benefit is the citizens that put them there. So they like to put up straw man arguments, such as, or straw man something or other, like, hey, it's going to be, like you said, in this barn, is going to be a venue for this or something for that. In some way, shape, or form, it benefits the public, when in all reality, it never benefits the public. It benefits them personally, or the people that they surround themselves with. It benefits them. In no way, shape, or form does it fulfill government's primary role of securing the people's liberty. That's what government is instituted for. If we're paying money, third party paying money, so no cost, no cost consideration, no quality consideration, it's for something else other than securing people's liberty.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's talk about some more stuff there. What's going on with I just read a recent article on the county commissions now forcing the school board to actually follow the state law on the divisive, corrosive, obscene, or provocative material in schools. How is that going?
Oh, I mean, that's just been amazing. And we did have three conservatives who got onto school board, but we have 11 school board seats, so we've still got a ways to go there. But even with those three, I mean, we are having conversations that we've never had before at school board meetings. And even though in the end, our conservatives get voted down, I mean, all of a sudden, we're seeing parents are challenging books and they're submitting it to our conservative school board members, and they're bringing it up in the school board meetings. And we're seeing and hearing the absolute disgusting details of some of these books, everything from really just straight up pornography to, the idea that small kids should be exposed to the ideas of suicide and really, murder and dark, disturbing issues that, children should never be exposed to. And yeah, there was a book, Lawn Boy, which was, I mean, just so foul. I mean, when they read some excerpts at the school board meeting and at the county commission, I mean, adults are just, squirming in their seats, like, oh, this is so uncomfortable to hear this, especially in mixed company. It's like, wow, if we as adults feel that uncomfortable, how do the kids feel hearing this? So that was really the one, I would say, out of all of the books, that was the one that got them to say, look, it's in violation of state law. And even though that was brought up at this school board meeting, everyone just kind of on the school board said, well, yeah, it does seem that way, but maybe it isn't. Maybe there's some other interpretation, which, I mean, the book was so graphic, there was no other interpretation. But, they really kind of just let it go and pushed it off to a committee and, didn't make a decision as a school board, which they should have done. So the commission does have their own education committee. And while they don't have nearly as much control over the school board as we would like, then they can at least demand certain things like that they follow the law. And they can also demand that for various expenditures that the director of schools needs to come before them and explain why these funds are being used. And that's the first time that, anyone has ever said, hey, director of schools, you need to come before the commission and explain these expenditures. In the past, they've always just rubber stamped everything. And in fact, our commissioner of education, the last time I heard, he's still refusing to come before the commission to justify various expenses. So,
it's definitely not an example of true servant leadership there. That's definite selfish leader. I don't know it's nefarious when you look at it, why these school boards won't actually serve the children and the parents. They're serving some other interest, be it a union interest with a NEA or the, whatever the other teachers union is, or they're serving these curriculum corporations, but they're definitely not serving the people that, entrust them with their children for 8-10 hours a day.
Yes, no, I know. It's really disturbing. And I think one thing that conservatives really need to work on, that we really try to explain to people, is when you talk to conservatives, a lot of times if their kids are grown or their kids are homeschooled or go to private school, they'll say, well, my kids aren't in the school, so I don't want to, I feel like I'm infringing if I go to the meeting and speak about this or that. Where the liberals, they are there en masse. Now, if there's any questions that will come up about race, they hold up these books on white fragility while people are speaking. They have no problem jumping in there without having kids in the system. So I think that mindset needs to change, because we're all stakeholders. Financially, we pay the taxes that support the schools. And of course, that's our next generation, our generation of leaders. So we're stakeholders in that aspect as well. So I think conservatives really need to change that mindset. And we are seeing people that, I ran into a grandmother who was at one of the school meetings, and she's like, I'm 73 years old and I've never been to a school board meeting, but my grandkids are in here and I want to know what's going on. So, we are starting to see that build, but we're way behind the liberals on being active in what's going on in our schools.
Absolutely. The conservatives gave up on that front in the culture war a long time ago, but we really need to take ground again, because like you just said, regardless if you have children in school or not, I don't have any children in school. I don't even have a grandchild in the public school yet, knock on wood. Well, no, anyway, I've already decided to homeschool my grandchild whenever the grandchild comes. But we do financially support all public schools in this country.
Right.
And even if we don't pay, a large amount of property tax, or say we're a renter or a conservative, we still pay federal income tax, which funds the Federal Department of Education, where a lot of this stuff is pushed down for, especially with these Title IX rules that are going to force, school lunch programs to go away, or school breakfast food programs to go away if they don't allow boys into girls' bathrooms. So there is a financial stake in whatever conservatives do with regard to public education in our country. And then to top all of that off, We just need to look at what resulted in the 2022 midterm elections, where the Gen Zers and youngers voted in huge numbers. And these are the most recent graduates, you could call them. I don't know if they really graduated anything, but these are the people that have finished their primary education in a public school system, and they're voting for more of this stuff.
Yes.
So we lose both ways. We'll lose our money, and then we're going to lose our country if we keep allowing the public education system to not only dumb down our kids, but make them completely no longer sensitive to sexually divisive and corrosive material. And when you do that to a child, when you make them comfortable or take away their uncomfortableness about sexual topics, that just opens them up for all kinds of, grooming. It opens them up to mental health problems later on down the road, which we're seeing in vast numbers now. I mean, we got this transgender thing running rampant in our country, and nobody wants to address the fact that it's a mental health problem. They want to force everybody to pretend along with them instead of treating the problem. So we have to take a stand or regain ground in this education debate.
Yes, we really do. And like I said, I think that seems to be the key, is to just break people out of that idea of, you have an interest in what happens in your local schools, as a stakeholder, no matter what. It doesn't matter if you have kids in the system or not.
Absolutely. So we could definitely assume that the county commissioners are now leaning more towards being servant leaders there in Sumner. But
they are.
We still have to fight the Board of Education. Like you said, the way to do that is these conservative county commissioners need to start controlling the purse strings for the Board of Education, because they control all the purse strings. They decide how much and what if of revenue from the county goes towards education. So they could hold their feet to the fire, because there's nothing a liberal loves more than other people's money.
It's true, but that's one thing. The commission is pretty restricted as far as the amount of money that goes to the schools. So that's where it's a little bit tricky. They can't just cut funding to the schools, but they can, like I said, make them come forward and justify certain expenditures. So, so we do have that part, but that's why, you'll still see that some of them would rather not go and not have to justify it, and then go to the next school board meeting and be like, oh, the commission is holding this up, so we can't do this expenditure, because they know technically they have the money, even though they're being asked to justify various expenditures. So it's a little bit tricky, and unfortunately, they have much more power than they've exercised in the past, but they don't have the level that I would like to see for oversight. And it's kind of amazing how little oversight there is in so much of government, and everyone seems to take it very personally. Like our director of schools, you would think he's being asked to do this horrible thing to justify an expenditure. And I mean, some of these are, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in the corporate world, you're asked many times to justify really small expenditures, right? Like, why did you, spend that much on lunch when you were traveling? And nobody thinks anything of having all that oversight, out in the real world. But in the world of government, if you want to look at what anybody's doing, everyone is very offended.
Yeah, absolutely, because they don't like being held accountable for the third-party payer system. They like
don't.
spending other people's money without concern for cost or quality.
Yes, absolutely.
Which gets me into another topic where I talked about you before we came on, about the Tennessee now. This recent article in the Tennessean states that Tennessee needs to invest more than $9 billion for K-12 education infrastructure.
Oh, it is crazy. I mean, we have, like in Sumner County, we have a school that was just built that is like a palace. They just spent all this money. I mean, it has an indoor training facility because I guess kids can't, go work out outside and sweat out in the summer heat. So they have, all this indoor stuff. And yet we have other schools that have, leaking roofs, have really bad problems. So we have that same thing where we have, there's all this money in some areas, and yet, the really basic things like having roofs that don't leak and, sewage systems that work properly or, within the school, those kind of things are not happening. And I mean, there was a lot of ESSER money given, and all kinds of crazy things happened to get some of this ESSER funding, the masking of our kids and all of that. And yet we see money being spent. I know in West Tennessee, they spent all kinds of money putting new turf on the football field, things like that. And yet, we have all these structural things that aren't being done. And again, nobody's held accountable. And they look at these ESSER funds like, oh, it's free money, free government money. Let's pull out our wish list instead of, let's pull out our list of priorities. The whole wants and needs, there doesn't seem to be a distinction in most of the people that run our school systems.
Right, because again, it goes back to government not being held accountable by the apathy of the people, right? You just alluded to that. People are offended in government when we actually start standing up and saying, hey, what are you doing to not only secure my liberty, but to safeguard or be a good steward of the money which you are taking from me to do certain things? Are you doing those certain things that are within the realm of constitutional authority? Or are you just doing things to benefit certain constituents or certain interests? Because that's really what it looks like is happening all over the country. So that turf thing that you just said, I guarantee you that the turf manufacturer or the company that sold the turf to that school district has an interest in whatever politicians did that vice improving the structure of the building.
Right, absolutely. That's, and this we just see over and over again. And, it's so frustrating. I'm not sure. I think the ESSER money was really one of the worst things to happen because it was such an inflow of cash. And yet it seems like the school districts, the mentality is like, this is extra cash that we get to spend on, fun stuff, and the money that the taxpayers are giving us, that's what we use to fund, fixing roofs and doing these other things, where the ESSER, they're not allowed to use it for expenses that are recurring. So they can't, give like a salary increase. They could give a bonus, but not something that's going to be ongoing. So it seems like that would have been the perfect thing to do some of these projects and repairs rather than, just spending it like wild people, knowing that, they can still crawl back to the public like, oh, it's for the children. And, it's just a never-ending cycle.
It's so we could sexualize your children. That's what they want to do.
Oh, it's awful.
So what other items you guys got going on there in Sumner County that would be interest to the listeners here, or good examples of servant leadership in their county that others can emulate, or that the rest of the state of Tennessee could take on board to get rid of this wokeism and this garbage that's happening?
I think, another thing we have is, a lot of the counties, there's so many different boards that citizens can serve on. I mean, there's not necessarily something that for everybody, but, you do have a library board, there's different, health boards. There are many different boards where they're allowed to have, at least a few citizens. So we're seeing people getting involved that are asking to be on some of these boards that, previously hadn't, been active, or, even people just going to the meetings. So I would say that's our biggest thing. We encourage everybody to go to at least one meeting a month, whether it's county commission, city council, school board, but some kind of meeting each month, go to the meetings and let your voice be heard. And then, if there's whatever your expertise is, see if there's some kind of committee that you can serve on. We have local pilots who, didn't realize that we have an airport commission. So, things like that. There are all kinds of chances to serve and really not only contribute to your community, be a servant, but, get really educated on what's going on. Because I think until you're either regularly going to the meetings or, involved sitting on some kind of committee, it's, you can hear it, but it's just very different to be right there and be a part of it.
Absolutely. I mean, our country, our constitutional republic, was founded upon citizen involvement in their own self-governance, but we've given that up. And this is why we have the government that we do have. Because people don't want to be that servant leader to go in there and spend a half hour to an hour of their day watching what government does to you. I mean, we started here in Sevier County, a lot of parents or taxpayers, such as myself, because I'm not a parent of a school-age child, started attending these school board meetings. And lo and behold, what happened? We found out all the garbage that's in there. And then what happened after more and more parents showed up? Well, the school board directed that school district leadership start attending as well, like a show of force, is what I explained. If they fill the room, there's not enough room for parents to come in and sit down. But government is afraid of citizenship involvement. They've gone so far away from what their intended purpose was and accountability to the people that they don't like it when we participate. So even just showing up lets government know that, hey, the sovereign in our country, which is the individual, is actually starting to pay attention to you now. And that's if everybody just exhibited that amount of servant leadership, showing up and watching what government's doing, we would have a much more responsive government, I believe.
Yes, it's true. I mean, it's hard to fight it at a higher level, even the state level, because, if you have 10 extra people show up when the legislature's in session, it's not like that's going to be noticed. But if you have, some of these meetings, only 2 or 3 people regularly go. So even if you could get 10 extra people, that's huge. That's noticed. And, we have ones now where, we're filling the room. So it's definitely noticed. Unfortunately, like I said, the left does seem to be better for the school board anyway, organizing the numbers. So, we need to get conservatives really out there and, attending those school board meetings, because a lot of times it looks disproportional in the other direction because the liberals are so good at getting there.
Right, because the liberals understood that part very early on in the culture war, that if they control the children's minds, they control generations of actions in the country. And 2022 midterm was a perfect example of it. I mean, everybody predicted this red wave that didn't even turn into a red trickle because of a 13 to 15% voting block of Gen Zers that were indoctrinated in this woke collectivism. Conservatives are not very good at being collective in their fights, but that is something the liberals do very well, and we could learn from that.
Yes, definitely. And we do try to look at, when they have their training materials available online, and we try to, say, well, what are they doing? And what is their organization like? How are they so successful? Because we do need to duplicate that. And, and we're on the correct side of this. We're on the side of freedom. So I feel like if we can just, be more organized, when people hear that message, there's just way more people that want more freedom than, people that want this full government control like the liberals are pushing for.
Absolutely. Because a lot of these people think if I just want to be left alone, as long as I'm left alone, I'm good. But little does anybody or very few people in this country realize this, that government's involved in every aspect of your life. Every aspect. So being left alone is an impossibility, and the only way to get to that point is by being involved. You could shut government down only by being involved. Being left alone is no longer an option, because Government touches every aspect of our life, from our very first waking moment till even while our head is on our pillow at night. Government is involved in our lives, so we're not being left alone. We have to wake people up to that fact.
Yes, definitely.
Well, Tina, I appreciate you coming on the show today, and like I said, when I put this out, I'll let you know. But it is important that people like yourself are getting involved, and then another key part of that for people like you, people like me, and people like-minded people like us, we have to drag other people along to force them to get involved. I mean, make a dinner date out of it with some friends. Hey, we're going to go to the county commission meeting, and then we'll go to Ruby Tuesday or whatever. But we have to get people involved. And if we break the crust off their eyes to see how much government is involved in our lives, we could truly turn this thing around.
Yes, no, it's true. I agree. You bring people out, and I think they have this perception that, it's so complex, it's so difficult. And then they see what's going on in the meetings, and a lot of them are like, well, I could do that.
Exactly. There's very little that our citizens can't do. And it only takes, like I said, sometimes it's a 10-minute email or a phone call, or it's an hour of your time attending a meeting that government's convened. So it's very little time, but the payback for that investment of that time could last generations. And we all need to get people involved. And people like yourself, I thank you for coming on the podcast today. And I hope to have you on more in the future. And keep doing what you're doing out there in Sumner County.
Yes, we will. And, anyone can do this in their county. It started, I think, with 5 people like 4 years ago. And now we have like over 200 people. So any county can do this.
So do you have a website or a social media page that people there or people in Tennessee to look at to figure out that they can get involved?
The main one, it's Sumner County Constitutional Republican, so it's sccr.org is the website, and then they do have a group on Facebook as well. So either one, you'll see all the events and get a good sense of how we're organized. And there's contact information if you're interested in starting your own group. We do have people attend our meetings all the time from all over the state that just want to see what we're doing and figure out how to duplicate it in their counties.
Well, good deal. I'll hang that information up on my website as well. And again, thank you for coming on today, Tina. And I hope you continue to take a stand in the arena.
Well, thank you so much, Larry.
All right, thank you. That's it for this week's show, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this conversation that we had with Mrs. Tina Tobin. What I hope that you take away from that interview is that it does not take much effort to engage with elected officials. It doesn't take much effort to remind them who the true sovereign in our state and in our nation is. Government, and this is all levels of government, they're not leaving anybody alone. It is time for us all to step up and lean in with your fellow citizens and start participating in our system of self-governance. Before we close, we have this week's wisdom from God's Word coming to us from 1 Timothy 4:12. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. We all need to be examples, not just to the believers, but the unbelievers as well. Setting the right example will draw them into wanting what we experience on a daily basis. They will want to know what we know. The same can be said as we deal with what appears to be a government that no longer wants to govern us, but to rule us. Standing in the arena, participating in our system of self-governance, showing our fellow neighbors that it only takes a bit of time and a bit of effort, which can pay huge dividends towards securing liberty for our children and grandchildren. Because, like I've said many times before, government is not leaving anybody alone that is either just waiting for somebody else to come to the rescue or thinking that because government agents are not at your door that they are leaving you alone. Just look at your paychecks. your property taxes or the rent you pay, sales taxes you pay on everything, or even your gasoline taxes, which are supposed to pay for road infrastructure in the first place, then look at all that. Then decide if government is leaving you alone. Thank you all for listening this week, and I pray that you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Until next week, stand in the arena with me. Reveille, it's time to wake up.